closing ceremonies, if you were there as a frosh or maybe a soph, you've already heard my story. So my perspective of what it was like to have my brother be affected by cancer when he was in high school, or graduated from high school. But today, he's here to tell his story about what it was like for him as an 18-year-old to go through leukemia and to be held off from going to university and be held off from participating in a great orientation program for a year, and his experiences and his survival of cancer. He beat it. He's here today to tell his story. And I guess on that note, I'll pass it over to my brother, Eric, and he'll...
Hey guys, I'm Eric Mark. I'm 23 years old, and sorry to be the bring down after all that fun, but I'm here to talk some serious stuff. This is where they put me. So I had a big summer this year. I started a full-time job. I graduated from university. I received my bachelor's degree. But it was also a big summer for another reason. This past May, I celebrated 6 years since my cancer diagnosis and 3 years since I've been cancer-free. So I'm here today to talk to you about having cancer as a university student and why events like Shinerama, the Charity Fox Run, and other fundraising and awareness events like this should matter to you, to each and every one of you. So here's my story. It started in grade 12. I was a pretty typical grade 12 student. I had reasonable grades, I'd like to think. I was president of the funny film club at my high school. And I enjoyed sports, mainly martial arts. I did competitive judo for 10 years, I think. My locker in high school was on the 3rd floor. And in November and December of grade 12, I started to notice, as I went up the stairs to go to my locker every day, I was getting tired, getting out of breath, kind of like Brandon with CF. I didn't know what was going on. Being in grade 12, being 17 years old, I just thought I needed more exercise. Maybe I'm getting out of shape. In December that year, I finally went to the doctor to try and figure out if something was wrong. It took 5 months of different tests. Nothing showed up that was wrong. We slowly had to start eliminating things, one by one by one. When we're in high school, and then when you're in university, and even through our 20s, all the way until probably about we're middle age, we tend to think that we're invincible. But generally, we're wrong. Sorry to level that. So as I went through all these tests, not knowing what was happening, things started getting worse. My knees would hurt whenever I bent down. And at high school, they had to give me an elevator key because I couldn't make it up the stairs anymore to go to my locker. I finally underwent a minor surgical procedure, which, again, Brandon's parents talked about, a lumbar puncture. It's a test to check your spinal cord fluid. It can be pretty normal. They didn't think it was going to result in anything, but bingo. The diagnosis, it was acute lymphoblastic leukemia, one of over 200 types of cancer. The doctors explained to me that this one was a blood cancer. So unlike tumors, everything that you hear about usually, it's not in one spot of your body. We can't just remove it. Blood cancers are everywhere. They affect every single part of your body. But this was all fine to me generally. It didn't faze me. What was going through my head at the time was just, what do we do now? Where do we go forward? Let's get through this. But looking back, many years later, my parents were sitting next to me crying in that doctor's room. The doctors in front of me were also really sad to have to tell a 17-year-old that they have cancer. Because the reality was, I did. I thought I'd have a podium, sorry. So I remember this day pretty well. It was a typical Friday afternoon in May of high school. I was hanging out after school with my friends, and my parents came by to pick me up in a big rush, which was really unusual, so I knew something must have been urgent. This was the week before my prom. High school was going to end in a few weeks, then there'd be exams. I had just accepted my university offer. Everything was done, everything was set. But that afternoon changed my life. All that was ahead of me, all those big plans that had been so meticulously taken care of, all that was gone. Since I was 17 years old, a minor, I got put into Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto, which is fortunately one of the leading children's hospitals in the world. My outlook on life at the time, because of having to go through all those tests while doing high school, hoping to get into engineering or architecture, my mentality was just to hold on, to get through it. I saw things as just tasks that I had to check off as done. I never thought that I couldn't do it. My stay at Sick Kids was pretty good. I had a private room, it had cable TV, and a private washroom. It was pretty sweet for a hospital stay. But there were waves of events, and everything seemed so long, but it all happened in a short 2 weeks at the hospital. One of the first things was I had a tube implanted in me, aka a port that, again, Brandon's parents talked about. I wish they were here to hear this. So it's basically, like they said, it's a platform implanted in your chest, connected to a tube that goes up to one of your arteries, so that when they inject you with chemotherapy and other drugs, they can go straight up to your artery and disperse to the rest of your body as fast as possible. Most people don't know what this is. It results in a little lump in your chest. When I went through airports, or even to the CN Tower once, having to go through metal detectors and security, they would poke and prod it, thinking I had to put a bomb inside my skin, which I guess people may do, but I didn't. So I remember having this procedure done pretty well. It was really early in the morning, before 8. I was rolled down to the basement of the hospital in my bed. I hadn't been allowed to drink the night before, so I was really thirsty. The hospital basement was dark. There was technicians and nurses running every which way, getting ready for their day. It was a scary place for a 17-year-old, and I can't imagine how it was like for lots of the toddlers who go through there every single day. I kept asking the staff for water. I just wanted to rinse my mouth to alleviate the thirst. I was 17 years old, so I understood I couldn't drink before surgery. But the staff were so used to dealing with little kids that they didn't trust me with water, so I just sat there, thirsty. But that was life in the hospital. I'd have random early morning procedures with an IV stuck into me through my port all day and night, pumping fluids and drugs all day long. There were lots of kids with me in that wing in Sick Kids. They were 6, 8, maybe 10 years old. There was even a baby on my floor. It was really sad. I think he was 6 months, with just his parents hovering over him all day. How do you even tell that a baby has cancer? On that floor, there was a little kitchen. It had soup and ice cream all day long, whenever you wanted it. This was meant to encourage kids to eat whenever they felt like it, because after chemo, lots of them didn't want to. So every night, I'd go into that kitchen to grab myself a snack before watching The Simpsons. And there'd always be this little little 6-year-old Chinese girl in the kitchen at the same time with me. She was bald from the chemo, and she had big chubby cheeks as a side effect from one of the drugs. It was strange to be 17 among all these kids, but it made me feel lucky, and I knew I had to be strong for them, because I knew what was happening, and most of them didn't. While staying in the hospital, I had a flurry of visitors, family friends, all coming to visit me, all bringing me gifts. Those 2 weeks in the hospital, I probably received more Chapters gift cards than I will in the rest of my life. But everyone's so nice when something like this happens to someone so close to them. No one knows really how to react, what to do. I mentioned to a family friend, sorry, this part brings back sad memories. I mentioned to a family friend I didn't have any pens in the hospital to do my crosswords. So she sent her son with 13 pens, as if I'd need that many to go through crosswords. But she never came to visit me herself, and because she couldn't bear to see me in that condition, I didn't understand that until years later. I had high school friends come and visit me. We'd play board games on my bed, they'd maybe bring me books and DVDs, and they'd help me plan my menu requests from the hospital. I even asked one of them to bring me some street meat into my hospital room, because I couldn't get any outside food. While visiting me in my hospital room, I saw my dad, my grandpa, and even some of my high school friends crying. I didn't know how to react. I didn't realize what was happening, that they were crying. My sister crying in the front row is making me sad. And because I didn't realize that they were crying and so sad at my situation, I just kept talking to them normally, which forced them to stifle themselves and made it even all that more awkward. But the whole time, none of this seemed strange to me. This was just my life, another thing to get through. I did end up going to my prom, if any of you were wondering. The doctors said yes, then they said no, and they said yes, and they said no, and they decided 3 times, right up until 5 o'clock the day of. My friends rode in their limos and they came to the hospital to take pictures with me. We booked one of the lounges and we had a pre-party before heading off to prom in the hospital. I remember desperately trying to get one of my friends to take my money for the limo seat that I had booked but didn't end up using. And I thought in my mind that this was just a normal friend paying another friend money that he agreed to pay him. But I didn't realize at the time how weird it would be to take money from a friend who's a cancer patient in a hospital. At the end of high school too, a couple of friends and I, we had practiced and rehearsed for months to learn one of OK Go's original music videos, if you've ever seen them. We were going to perform it at the final assembly, and they're not easy things to learn if you've ever watched them. But because I was in the hospital, they had said they weren't going to do it, I pushed and pushed them to do it without me because there was another friend who knew my part. And when they didn't, I was crushed. I saw this as my fault, that it was my burdening them, and they were unable to do something they had worked hard to do. But again, I didn't realize what it would be like from their side to do it without me. So after 2 weeks in the hospital, things were looking good. The cancer was under control, and things were going as the doctors had expected. Leukemia has one of the longest standard treatment protocols of any of the mainstream cancers. A lot of the tumors, you could go through intensive radiation and chemotherapy, and you can be done in as little as 2 to 4 weeks, cancer-free. But with leukemia, if you're diagnosed as an adult, you have to go through 2 years of treatment. And if you're a child, it's 3. So the next 6 months out of hospital was known as intensification therapy. So I'm living at home, but I'm going to the hospital 2 to 3 times a week while taking daily pills and medication at home every day. Another thing I had to deal with while at home doing this was that on top of cancer, all my high school friends had now gone off to university. So even though I was home with all my creature comforts, there's no one around to hang out with, no one to talk to. This is one of the toughest things I ever had to deal with because I felt completely abandoned. Another one of the side effects from all my medication was induced diabetes as a side effect. That's how intense fighting leukemia can be. That the doctors accept that the drug benefits of fighting leukemia outweigh the negatives of diabetes. One of the more typical side effects is losing your hair. When you go through chemotherapy, which are drugs that they put into your body, they essentially kill off all your weaker cells. So they target cancer cells, but any of your body's normal weaker cells die off with them because they just can't handle it. One of which is your hair. So your hair literally just falls out. I took great pride in the fact that my hair was reasonably strong. All that I lost was sort of the front end of my hair, but it had the unfortunate effect of making me look like I was a balding 40-year-old. So I had to shave my head bald anyway. After intensification therapy is what's called maintenance treatment. This lasts a whole 2.5 years. It's less intense than intensification, from the sounds of it, obviously. But you still take daily pills and medication, and you have monthly hospital visits, still with side effects. But because of this, I was allowed to begin preparing for university a year later. This was hard. All my friends had gone on already, and they were in second year. I was still completely alone. I went to orientation week not knowing a single person. But orientation week, thankfully, pushes you to meet people, and university is a wonderful place to meet people, as you all know. I registered with the campus medical office, who made sure that all my professors knew what was going on in my life, and they could help me out. This was a major role in getting me through university. I took a full course load while going back to Toronto periodically for cancer treatment. I missed a few lectures here and there, but otherwise, things were pretty normal. Again, just things to get through, things to get done. I ended up completing my first 2 full years of university, including doing a co-op job while undergoing treatment for leukemia. Most of my friends and co-workers had no idea what was going on. The few friends I did tell at university were completely shocked when I told them. There were times when I did get sick from treatment. I'd get headaches, I'd get nauseous, and I also had a weakened immune system, again like Brandon. So that when I got sick from a cold or the flu, I got really, really sick. After first year, I went to look for off-campus housing with some friends, and we met a landlord on campus to sign our lease. That day I showed up to sign the lease, I was walking with a cane because I was so weak. The landlord and my friends, they all asked me what was wrong, why was I walking with a cane? I played it off, just that I had an iron deficiency and that my blood levels were low, which was a half-truth. And it's not because I didn't want others to know, it's because I didn't want to be treated differently. The biggest thing while undergoing cancer treatment was that I wanted to be normal. I didn't want to be treated differently. At home, my parents would offer to get me things, to help me do things, and I'd almost be yelling at them that I was normal. I wanted them to leave me alone. I could do it. But really, they were just trying to help. My biggest fear in university was being stigmatized. I didn't want people to know, again, not because I wanted to keep it private to myself, but I didn't want to be treated differently. I didn't want their pity to stand out. I wanted to prove to everyone that I could do anything anyone else could. And this is what kept me going. This is what helped me keep my chin up. During treatment, I had the opportunity to go to a camp specifically for kids with cancer, Camp Portuguese, if any of you have ever heard of it. It's a camp up in cottage country. You can go water skiing, canoeing, rock climbing, there's a dining hall, it's got the works. But it's also got one thing most camps don't have. People you can relate to. Others with the same disease at different stages, so you can compare notes. People gave me advice, I gave others advice, and this camp played a big supportive role in helping me to get through this. And both my sister and I continue to volunteer there to this day. One of the biggest goals actually stated for this camp is to help kids feel normal during treatment. They could play sports, and if they were tired, they could sit down, and no one would ask any questions. And no one made a big deal that you were tired either. You did things on your own, and it was empowering. The camp had a full medical center, up there in Muskoka, in the middle of nowhere. You could go there for daily treatment and even minor procedures. So that you could be playing sports, you go into the center for an hour, have something done, and you go back up to the rock wall, as if nothing had happened. It was the ultimate normalcy. Here's a little plug. That medical center was built entirely by funds from the Ronald McDonald House Foundation. So when you see those little donation boxes at the front of cashiers at McDonald's, they really do incredible, wonderful things. But back to being normal. In residence at university, I was placed on a floor geared to people with medical conditions. I was scared to accept going there because I thought it'd isolate me with less outgoing people. But this was an inappropriate stigma to give, especially for someone with cancer. But again, I thought of myself as being normal. I ended up in a suite with three other guys, one who was placed there because he was allergic to hazelnuts. So they're not exactly, well, it's deadly, but it's not terminal illness. Having a major illness, though, makes you see the world in a different view. Little things were suddenly so huge because you were weak or sick. Little bumps in the sidewalk, or if your door is stuck or particularly heavy to open, these are big impediments to life because I was just feeling not well. I was tired a lot, so I had to sit down. And when you're 18, 19, 20 years old and you're sitting down a lot, it doesn't look good. I'd be riding the subway in Toronto and maybe a senior citizen would get onto the train and other people would look at me with like, cut-eye. Like, why are you standing up giving this person your seat? But I literally didn't have the energy to stay standing up so that I could give them my seat, and it felt awful to have to do that. I once looked so sick in a doctor's office that I had an elderly gentleman stand up and offer me his seat. This was a really strange experience. Things like this just change your world. Some people avoid handrails in public, or they don't go to public bathrooms because I think only hobos use them. But when you're fatigued or you're feeling sick, or like you might fall down, these things are lifesavers, no matter how dirty or grimy they may be. Now in my job at a company called Dillon Consulting, I'm an urban planner, and I put a big emphasis on accessibility and what we call universal design because of my experiences. I know that the world needs to be easier to navigate because it helps kids, it helps your grandparents, and it helps the sick. If you can make life easier, just for 5 seconds for one of these people, it can be the difference between a good and a bad day. So why your support matters, why you should all care about this. The most recent statistics from the Canadian Cancer Society are pretty grim. 2 out of every 5 Canadians will get cancer in their lifetimes. And so this doesn't even include other acute, chronic, and terminal illnesses like multiple sclerosis and CF. So that basically means if out of your family of 4, the average family size, 2 of you will be diagnosed with cancer or another major illness in your life, at least 2. Just while I've been standing here talking, 3 people in Ontario alone have been diagnosed with cancer, and another one of them has died. But this statistic proves one positive thing at least, that survival rates are getting better. There's been a 70% improvement in cancer survival rates over the past 20 years, thanks to funding for research. If Terry Fox was lucky enough to be diagnosed with his cancer today, he would have been able to keep his leg, and he would likely have made it through his illness. And because of that same research, I'm here today talking to you, healthy, with no side effects because of all that research. Last year's orientation team and events like Shinerama at Western raised a record $200,000 for more research. So I'm here today as a cancer survivor to show you that events like this are important, that your money really does do wonderful things. I had the chance to work in a cancer research lab for a few weeks during one of my co-ops, and in that lab, they were using the diabetes response to fight cancer in rats. It was unimaginable. Can you imagine engineering diabetes to fight cancer? These people have brilliant minds, but they need your help so that they can do their work, because it is working. I need you to go out, to motivate others, to raise awareness, and even just to give blood. Every bit counts, and we all need to do what we can. I'm going to end with one of my favorite quotations from a professor. So as an individual, you guys may not be able to change the world, but the world, it can't change without you. Thanks very much.